me and Adam are going to get a lot closer because we're sharing a microphone. So that'll be good to see that relationship blossom over the evening as well. I'll pass it on.
I did offer that I could sit on his lap, but he declined politely. So yeah, I'm, as you can see on the thing there, I'm a senior front-end developer at Tundra, which is an agency in Collingwood. Before that, I was actually a designer. So I've been equal parts designer and developer. The first half of my career, I was a designer and a front-end developer, but then I noticed that I was actually spending more time designing in the browser and using code, and predicted that I would be doing more of that in the future. So I decided to opt for a completely front-end developer role, and that trend, thankfully, has proven to continue. So now I'm a senior front-end developer at Tundra, where I get to work with the teams there, and yeah, effectively foster an environment where we can systematically remove every process that exists, and continue to do that. So it's been awesome. We work with some really great clients. I spend most of my time on the Nike account, so we're their digital partner over here, and yeah, we do some pretty incredible work with them. Very, very fast turnaround work, even for agency standards. So that's what kind of piqued my interest in pursuing DesignOps a little bit more, which I'll talk about obviously a little more as the night goes on. I also co-organized the DesignOps meetup in Melbourne. Unlike Academy XI, we have no code of conduct. We are not a safe space, and in fact, we are the most dangerous design meetup in Melbourne. So if you're looking for an alternative to all of the other safe meetups, you are more than welcome to come hang out with us. And we actually have an event on next Wednesday. So if you're new to the meetup, it's probably a great opportunity because we're doing alternating between doing talks and doing an informal chat every month. So this is our fireside chat catch up, where we're actually going to have an open fireplace, and you can come and chat with us and everyone else into this awesome space. Yeah. So
in agency land, that can sometimes get a bit lost because we kind of potentially get a bit disconnected from our clients. So how do you manage that at Tundra, Adam?
Getting disconnected from clients?
Yeah.
Well, we've been doing a few things recently that might contribute to that answer. So one thing would be an approach of getting the clients directly into your Slack group. So we've had a lot of success with that. It doesn't really make too much sense to have, sometimes it does, but a lot of the times it doesn't make sense to have a middleman in between you as a worker and actually like stuck into the code or design, and then a producer or an account manager translating what you're saying back to the client and through that again. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense. And if you open that up to an entire client, so you've got everyone on their side in that chat, they can see what's going on. It's a little bit of a mind shift because you obviously have to be transparent and candid in the way that you would be internally in front of the client. But it's very eye-opening when you do try it. There's been more than a few examples of this happening where the clients, our initial sort of perspective of them were these are very sort of corporate clients, very down the line, straight to business. My tech director is definitely not in that mindset, and he basically just treated it as if it was our own chat. And within about 30 minutes, they were like posting, gifs of cats and stuff like that. So you really have to not sort of project that image of your clients because they're just people. Like it's not, you don't have to be scared of them. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is, again, getting clients in there. We've recently been doing some design sprints, so getting the client or stakeholders in the room with you, going through that either formal or informal design sprint process, where you can effectively come up with a whole bunch of ideas with the client in the room, and they're validating them or declining them immediately. And that just seems like another huge win. It's like, why would you try and emulate the mind of the client and wonder if this is going to be interesting to them or useful for them? You can get them directly in the room and get that immediate feedback. So those would be a couple of examples I would use. But really, I mean, it's just common sense. It's like, how do you keep in touch with your people you work with? You're on Slack or you're in person, so clients shouldn't be an exception to that rule. And I think that's going to continue to be commonplace. I think agencies will either work collaboratively with their clients, whether it's them going out there or them coming into the office. We've been doing it heaps at Tundra. We've got clients who have just been there like full time, basically, as effectively team members. So they're in all of our stand-ups. They're looking over our shoulder while we're doing work. We can grab them and again, just validate those ideas very quickly on the spot rather than typing up a 4,000 word email just to get, would you like the green button or the blue button? Let us know. You can just like get them over and they can just tell you immediately. So I would just say just treat them like people and treat them as if they were team members. Yeah.
And you describe working as Nike as you're their digital partner. So it's almost like you have become part of their team and you have this ongoing kind of custodianship over their digital properties. So is it kind of like being in a product team in a way because you are actually working with them on such an ongoing basis?
I wouldn't say it's so much of a product team. It's certainly more of a traditional creative kind of relationship where we're both trying to get the best creative ideas and execute them to the Nike standard. Like they've got probably I would say top 3 brands in the world. So there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, which is terrific because they push us to do amazing work. But they're like we are about 7 minutes walk from their office, so we go there all the time. They come into the office all the time. We're very collaborative in the way that we work. So again, it's just another example of I couldn't imagine it not being like that and being successful. So, yeah.
Adam, on your side of it, you have sat across design and dev, and you kind of still are across both. You've said before that you in your intro that this is kind of where you expected design to be going. So you're kind of sitting, if we're talking on one side about the people side of things and the human facilitating side of things, you're kind of talking about being on the edge of the technology side of things. So how does that play into the designers or developers' role in a product team?
So I'm equally involved in the team or the people as well, first of all. So that's, which again, I can touch on later, but I think that's one of the 3 sort of things of the design ops kind of idea. But probably to get back to your point as well. So the development team, I think it's shifting. I think the responsibilities of the developers are shifting. Again, I can only speak personally from agency experience, but the landscape of development is so broad, and I feel like there's almost a inverse trend at client side or product companies where people are kind of specializing in these narrower fields. So, you take the term developer or designer for that matter, but let's go with developer. So to say that you're a developer is such a hugely broad term now than what it was 10 years ago, for example. So you can specialize as a DevOps person, you can specialize as a UX developer, a UI developer, a backend developer, even down to specific like libraries now. It's like, oh, I'm just a React developer. It's like, okay. So I think, but having said that, that's been my sort of insight into other companies that I've talked to people at. At agencies, it's actually the opposite. You're expected to do all of this stuff. So if you're a developer at a company, so we don't have those narrow terms. We don't have, I'm a UI developer, I'm a UX developer, or I only do Angular, or I only do React. Like, we have to do it all. So I think, speaking from my experience, it's just a constant cycle of learning and skilling up. So, and that applies to everyone. That's not just the developers. So at our agency, for example, actually on a recent Nike project, we had to do an augmented reality application that we pitched to the client that they wanted to do. And so we had a UX lead doing 3D modeling work. Like that's how broad the roles can kind of shift. And I think that the designers have caught up with that as well. So it's like learning to work with a designer or developer effectively. You have to have a genuine interest in what the other person's doing to be able to communicate in the same language, share that vision. To me, that's like one of the most important things as a team, is having a shared vision collectively. And if that vision involves, not taking this approach of creating static designs and just handing them off to the developer and expecting them to translate that into a build, then I'd say that's probably a good vision. But I think having a vision is probably the most important thing So I've gone a little off track, but hopefully that gives a little bit of insight into what you're asking.
Adam, you have made a meeting countdown timer that shows everyone exactly how much money they're wasting for every person that's in every meeting, for every minute that goes by, every second that goes by, I believe. I've used it. I think it's great.
Correct.
Your philosophy is very much about going rogue, and in a way that's kind of the most business-minded thing ever, right? To say, like, do you really need to go to every meeting, every stand-up? How much is it costing the business, and how do we concentrate our efforts and provide the most value? How does DesignOps play into that kind of mindset and mentality, and explain DesignOps for us, for everyone who doesn't know what it is?
So we don't know either, but that's kind of the joke. It's a very vague term. I do know what it is, but it's kind of taking a little bit of a leaf from DevOps, which is the development version of it. Again, if you go back in time, there was a time where development wasn't as matured as it is now. It was like the wild, wild west. It still is in some places, but thankfully it's become a lot more standardized. So DesignOps is really three components for me. So one is the tooling, so the technical side. Someone like Mark Dalglish from Seek is he's the DesignOps lead there, so that's his actual role now. He's very much spearheading the technical side of things, and I know he does other components too, but they're doing some crazy stuff there. For example, they've basically written something where they can take their production code base and convert it into a sketch library in about 3 seconds. So this means that designers do not have to create replicas of what's on production in their sketch files. They've actually got this shared component library that gets updated automatically whenever they do a deployment. So the designers are actually working with production components rather than the other way around. So that's one example of the tech sort of direction. There's other things too. So we were talking about low fidelity wireframes before. Airbnb has been prototyping something around that where they've actually trained this application through machine learning of feeding it just dozens and hundreds of wireframes effectively and telling it what components in their production code base relate to those wireframes. So the time from prototyping to production is actually zero. So you don't have to spend any time testing an idea. You can actually just do it by sketching a few pieces on a piece of paper and showing it at the computer, and you will get a working prototype. Like it's that's the direction that it's going. And we're currently at the Atari like Pong stage of DesignOps, where there's all these awesome sort of seeds of ideas that will only continue to go in that direction over time, and that's just becoming clearer on a weekly basis. So DesignOps is basically, in my mind, a way to allow designers to be spending more time doing the tasks that they should be and less time doing the things that they shouldn't be doing. So whether that's worrying about managing files on their file system, it could be something as basic as that, like how do they share designs with their co-workers and collaborate together. It's a very common problem, and it's fairly easily solved. Things like version control, so developers have had the luxury of having version control where they've basically got snapshots of their progress as they go. Designers don't have this. The best option they have is final1.pst, final2.
Use me, today's date.
Yeah, final3 dash final. Use this one like PSC. So that trend is still happening as well. So DesignOps alleviates that. But more so, in my mind, there's a third tenet of it. So you've got the design, the development, but to everyone else's point, the business case or the management sort of side, or I prefer to say the lack of management, is really what's the interesting part of it for me. So, you've got people in all these isolated roles, and no one's really taking ownership of bringing them all together. So, of course you've got technical directors, you've got design directors, all these different directors. They're too busy in meetings and doing all these tasks themselves to have any time to spend with the designers a lot of the time. And they'd be lucky to kind of take some time and think about how all these things are interconnecting. They're often too busy. So I think DesignOps to me is almost an excuse to legitimize doing what we all know is the right thing to do, that no one is actually consciously investing any time into. It's just kind of like this thing that we're kind of doing in little pockets of the company, but no one's really taking a complete look at it. And so for me, it's that embedding that into the workplace and getting everyone on board with these ideas. And That's the part I really like, and encouraging people to not rely on anyone else for it, but work it out amongst ourselves. Like, we don't have to wait for anyone to implement DesignOps. Like, it's down to everyone in the team. It's really not something you have to ask permission for. If you want to start using some version control for your designs, just start using it, and show the benefits of it to the rest of your team. They've probably been wanting to try it for the last 6 months and haven't felt like they can, or they're just waiting for someone to tell them. And as I said, like, if your design manager is too busy doing other stuff and isn't like on the forefront of this, you need someone else who is. And I think that's where DesignOps can certainly help. So, yeah. A very broad question. And being agency side, I think specifically product is difficult for me to comment on. However, I do think that there has been a trend of, as I was saying before, these more very specialized areas that seem to be popping up almost overnight. And you'll notice that the recruiters' job descriptions somehow require you to have a greater length of experience than the amount of time that the term has existed. So that's also a very interesting paradox. But I think I'm a little bit biased. Obviously, working in an agency, I have personally found over the years that actually the smaller the team is, it's much more effective in producing work effectively. So what I have noticed is that a lot of these bigger companies, which are bigger because they have more people, you do run into these complexities of having an 80-person design team, or whatever that involves. And I found that it seems counterintuitive, and maybe this is already obvious to everyone, but the more people you throw at a project, the productivity actually decreases. The output is actually less than the sum of the parts, because the more people you add on, it just adds much more complexity in communication, much more complexity in terms of vision. There'll be shared visions in some areas, and then there'll be sort of a group of misfits that don't share that vision. So I would say that personally, again, I'm very agency focused, but we're already practicing this at Tundra. We reached a certain amount of employees, and my director, who's actually sitting up the back, made a conscious decision to actually split the company into two. We're still in the same office, but we're effectively two self-contained teams with our own sets of clients, our own sets of disciplines, and we operate independently from each other. We obviously, share knowledge and resources between each other, but in my opinion, it's been the best thing that has ever happened. And the amount of collaboration has just gone off the roof. The amount of initiative from team members has just 10x'd since we made that shift. Like, you can trace it all back to this one shift. And the smaller the team, the less intimidating it is to make changes in the team or the way you want to work. It's difficult to get a dozen developers on board with changing to a new framework. It's much easier if you have half that number who all share a similar vision. So in terms of agencies, I don't know if this is going to be a widespread thing. I don't think it will be, but I'm certainly a big advocate for keeping teams lean, and the amount of work you can do is actually just astronomically high compared to in teams I've worked in the past that have 10 times that amount of people, and they take 4 times as long to build and design it. It's incredible. So that would be my, I guess it's not really a prediction, but that's the way I see it, that it should be going. Smaller groups of teams working on their own sort of parts of things, or just their own projects.